On April 19, 1954, a book was released entitled Seduction of the Innocent, written by German-American author and psychiatrist Frederick Wertham. Having nothing better to do with his time, he wrote about the negative influences comic books had on youth as a form of literature and listed them as the leading cause of juvenile delinquency. He believed the violence, sexual themes, and adult-oriented stories found within crime comics, horror comics, and even superhero comics were encouraging those behaviors in children. Wertham went on about the blood and gore found in comics such as Tales from the Crypt, the hidden sexual undertones found within Batman and Robin, with them living together as partners, which promoted homosexuality, still considered a mental disorder at the time, how he believed Superman was un-American and fascist, suggesting that people let those that are stronger solve all the problems for them, the fact that Wonder Woman stories focused on bondage, something her creator would later admit, and that Wonder Woman herself had to be a lesbian since she was constantly portrayed as strong and independent. Wertham attacked the comic book companies themselves, selling these stories that he believed were trash, and expressed his concerns for the mental well-being of young boys and girls who were being subjected to them. Seduction of the Innocent sold relatively well in the United States, which caused widespread fear among parents, librarians, and other adults of note, which led to congressional hearings of which Wertham himself testified in. Despite the committee not blaming comics entirely for committing a crime, they did force the industry to alter and monitor its content from within. Thus, the Comics Code Authority was born. The Comics Code Authority, or the CCA, was formed in 1954 in response to the hearings by the Comics Magazine Association of America. It was a group that self-regulated and censored the content found within the comic book industry. Some of the largest publishers in the country adopted this code, such as Marvel, then known as Atlas Comics, and DC, and were forced to submit each and every comic they made to them in order for the stories to be screened and hopefully authorized. When they did, they received the stamp of approval by the CCA. Though most comic series were able to withstand this change, some were not, such as Tales from the Crypt, The Vault of Horror, and The Haunt of Fear, horror comic lines produced by EC Comics. The publisher of EC Comics at the time, who testified against Frederick Wertham and the committee, William M. Gaines, revealed in 1983 that he gathered all the publishers from all over the country after the hearings concluded, in hopes of them banding together and fighting their decision. Instead, the other publishers continued with forming the CCA and created a code and list of criteria, which forced Gaines to end those particular comic book lines. What a shame. The list of criteria of the Comics Code Authority was as follows. No comics were allowed to present crime in any sort of positive way, such as wanting to imitate criminals, distrust law enforcement, or have sympathy for evildoers. Policemen, judges, and other likewise government officials must not be made to be disrespected. In every story, good must always prevail against evil. Scenes depicting extreme violence, gore, unnecessary knife or gunplay, or prolonged physical agony are not permitted. Females shall be drawn realistically, and profanity, nudity, sex, and other similar themes will be eliminated. Use of the words terror and horror are forbidden. All scenes depicting horror, The Walking Dead, vampires, werewolves, ghouls, and cannibals are not allowed. Now there are more rules to the CCA than that, but those are the main focuses of the code. As you can see, those last two forced the end of the Tales from the Crypt line and other horror-related stories from EC Comics. It's like the other publishers had an out for them, maybe because Gaines was the one who spoke at the hearings, who knows. Tales from the Crypt was an awesome series, and it was unfortunately cut short due to all this craziness. Thankfully, EC Comics is still around today, thanks to their Mad Magazine line. The Comics Code Authority played a strong and active part in censoring comics throughout the remaining 1950s and much of the 1960s. Companies didn't want to advertise in comics that didn't have that stamp. By the 1970s, the independent comic scene rose and became more prominent, so those publishers were able to sneak in more banned content due to them not being distributed by larger channels. By the 1980s, the CCA was starting to weaken as more violence and darker themes were being approved, and by the 2000s, advertisers didn't care about the stamp anymore. In 2001, Marvel withdrew from the CCA and instead made its own form of rating system to create stories for various age groups. Bongo Comics abandoned the CCA in 2010, DC in 2011, and a day later, Archie Comics removed themselves from it as well, which officially made the code defunct after almost 60 years of being in effect. Despite the Comics Code Authority dissolving, it doesn't exist today, and the comic book industry is now free to grow, reaching heights it could only have dreamed of decades before, thanks to all the movies and television shows being made, creating more interest in the genre. The mid-1950s was by far the darkest time in comic book history. During that period, it wasn't like today. Fans didn't care about Marvel vs. DC, it wasn't about whether the Marvel Cinematic Universe was better than the DC Extended Universe, or any dumb bullshit like that. The very livelihood of comic book lovers was attacked. Comic books themselves almost ceased to exist. A hobby and passion I cherish so much in my life, and sometimes take for granted, could have been eliminated from a young boy or girl's hands. They would have been robbed of something truly wonderful in their life, and even talking about it brings a tear to my eye. All the thought-provoking messages the medium helped promote over the years might have been silenced forever. What Frederick Wortham did was unacceptable, and he will forever live in infamy among comic book fans. Whether it was an act of old-school mentality, one made through his own insecurities, or due to a religious belief of some kind, he targeted a form of media a lot of people enjoyed and almost ruined it for everyone. I want to say this type of thing is over and done with, but sadly, it's not. Every day, you see artistic works attacked for some reason or another. Harry Potter promoting witchcraft, female-led superhero films hiding some sort of secret, feministic agenda which is in some way ruining the world, social justice warriors and their influence on comic books, video games causing violence in kids, the Illuminati, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. The CCA was a way for people to blame a form of entertainment for their kids' behavior, but realize that comic books, movies, television, video games, all this stuff isn't really the problem. It's not the content found in these things that necessarily cause children to act out. It's the fact that they weren't taught right from wrong effectively by their parents and other authority figures. Strong morals weren't ingrained in them from a young age. That's what deciphers fact from fiction. Whether it's parents, teachers, friends, all these environmental factors influence children. Just because they watch, play, or read something inappropriate or subjectively bad doesn't mean it will make them bad. They need to learn patience, responsibility, acceptance, compassion, qualities that make them a better person at their core. Don't point fingers at the things they do in their spare time that offers them a level of escapism. It's how they are taught to think and question these things. That's what makes them who they are. It makes all the difference.